Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome everyone. If you're at least 40 or 50, and you'll probably remember as a child that you were using or know somebody who was using something like this. And if you're still not sure what it is, it was actually to create these. I've created some different versions of these, different style pins, different numbers of pins. So what I'll do, I'll have a chat about all of these at the end of the video. First thing I've got to say about these is they make great gifts. So if you're looking for gifts for kids, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, especially the young ones, then you'll be surprised at how young you can be when you can start using one of these, especially with a little bit of adult help if they really do struggle. I remember we had one of these when I was growing up, and ours used to be basically an old nylon thread reel, which was a solid wooden one with a hole in the middle, and I think we just had 4 nails in the top. Why did I want to have a look at doing these? Well, the first thing was really from the last video with the snowman. When I was creating my little snowman, I just knew that it needed some form of a scarf, and I didn't really want to go out and buy something. I spotted somebody else on social media who actually had their partner knit them some of these. And the good thing is as well though, is that these literally just take a matter of minutes to make. I mean, this scarf here probably took me no longer than 15 minutes. This was the first one I created. It's a little small sort of needle, and I used these wire sort of like hooks on the top. And the thing that's common with all of these is that you've just basically got to have some form of a ring that you can put your pins in the top and a hole in the middle. Now the way these work is that as you do your sewing on the top here on the pins, the work basically drops through the hole and then comes out the bottom. The first thing to consider really is how easy is one of these to hold. So I've got something obviously like that which fits nicely in my hand. I mean, even something like that you can hold even as an adult for 2 or 3 fingers. Somebody smaller may well prefer something smaller rather than something taller like that. So it's something you have to experiment with. So the first thing is really your pins. I mean, you could use just ordinary nails on there, and the only thing I was worried about a nail was that if you get any sharp edges underneath, especially when you're using something like wool, it's going to catch on there and start pulling all the wool to pieces. Now I bought a pack of these off eBay, not very expensive. I think it was about £3 for the pack there. There's 50 or 100 of them in there, and hopefully you can see on there, if I can just hold that up, how short these are. And that's my only real concern on this. These are really very, very short. If I could have got some of these which were probably twice as long, then I think they would have been a lot better. Now the problem with them being so short is that, and they're very wire thin, is that getting them into your work and holding them there. I mean, I used the smallest drill bit I've got, which is a 1mm drill bit, to partially put the hole in there and then really try and force these in with a pair of pliers. It could be quite easy that these could pull out. The reason I got that is because the idea is when you try and pick up your stitch, you've got your stitch spread apart so that you can get your needle in easier to pick it up. So the second one I made was this one, and I went for a totally different types of pins. I ordered these on eBay. I mean, this whole box I've got here, as you can see, I've got lots of pins in here, different sizes. I think that cost me about £6–7. Good thing about these is because you can then pick the longer pins that you want, you can drill your holes reasonably depth in there, and you can secure them in there nice and tight. I've actually found this a lot quicker and easier to use compared to this one for doing each individual stitches. But because you've got 6 stitches, it actually takes you a lot longer to produce your work compared to a 4-stitch one. But the one probably annoying thing I did find on this, which I'd have to probably try and alter and see if it makes any difference, is the rotation of the way these loops are. Because when you tend to pull your wool up, you tend to pull it up on the front here. So therefore you're then forcing it width-wise for the stitch to grow. Whereas if I had these rotated 90 degrees, so the eye came up at the front, you're already pulling the stitch out wide, and it would probably slip over a lot easier. So that's another thing to consider as well. And with the third one that I did in the project video, I actually made the wooden pegs, and I've got to say that is by far the quickest and easiest one I found. So I would personally go for this option with the wooden pins rather than the 2 metal ones I've done. Now, what's the difference between using 4 pins or 6 pins? Well, if you're doing what they call proper spool knitting or French knitting, as what spool knitting means basically is that you're creating a spool where effectively you're knitting a tube. There is actually a hollow hole all the way up through the centre of this. Now, in order to produce a proper spool knitting, you've got to have a minimum of 3 pins, and it doesn't matter how many you can go up to. You can go from 3 to 100. So the smallest one on the left, that's actually just made up using 3 stitches per loop, so it's actually quite fine. The next one was where I used all 4 pins, and it created this one, which is actually slightly bigger. Finally, with what I did with the third one was used this one with all 6 pins. Problem with using the 6 stitch one compared to a 3 or a 4, it does take a lot longer to build up the length of your final piece of work. Now the second thing you need to consider as well is really effectively what you use in some form of a needle. I've got all 3 types here. So this is the one I did in the project video. That was the second one I did, and that was the first one I did. Now the first thing you really want is quite a good point on the end, because often not you're trying to get through a small gap in the wool to try and pick up a whole piece of wool. Now the other thing as well to consider as well is how much you taper this. This one actually tapers out quite wide quite quickly, whereas these other 2 are a lot narrower, and these to me work a lot better than that. And thirdly, and again it goes really like with the shape of these, it's comfort of use. I just basically had that as an offcut of wood, which is why I created that on the first one. And even though it works quite well, because it's sort of like there in just in my fingers, I actually found this harder and slower to use and more cumbersome. Whereas with these longer ones, I actually found them a lot quicker and easier to use. And the one that I had in the project video there, I actually probably found the best, because you really want something with a very sort of tight, close grain, and something that's not really going to chip out and split very much. For finish wise, because they're going to be going on something like wool, I didn't want to put wax on. A spray lacquer would have probably done, but I just thought I would use lemon oil. At the beginning I did mention these make great gifts. Now I've got to say that if you've got the skill to make one of these, then you've got more than enough skill to use it. And there are lots and lots of videos out on YouTube on how to use these. Don't just rely on what I've said that I find the best designs. What you really need to do is when you make one of these, you need to test it yourself personally to then see what you think of it. I hope it's given you some ideas of what to make, maybe brought back some memories of your childhood days. And please do have a go at these, because like I say, they make great gifts for the young ones and maybe some of the older people too as well, to have a go at something when they're just sat there watching the telly or something. Be interested to hear your thoughts on this, and really certainly all your stories on these. Thanks a lot for watching.